How should we read the book of Revelation? And by the way, it's Revelation, not Revelations. There are 5 different ways of approaching the book of Revelation. The first is called the futurist view, where you say it's primarily dealing with what's going to happen in the future. The second is the preterist view, that you're saying that the book of Revelation is primarily something that happened in the past. The third is the historicist view, which is where you really see the book of Revelation playing itself out throughout church history. The fourth is what is called the idealist view, which is where you see the book of Revelation primarily as these symbolic themes that play themselves out in human interactions, for example, with government, etc. And then the last view, the right view, is what's called the eclectic view, where you take what's good from each of these systems and you put them together. The problem with the futurist view is that the book of Revelation is written to churches in the past. It has to make sense to the original audience before you start talking about Apache helicopters in Iraq or something crazy like that. It's written to churches in the past. The problem, though, with seeing the book of Revelation as having all happened in the past is that Jesus hasn't come back yet, so it can't all be in the past. As soon as you take the historicist reading and you try to figure out where in church history the book of Revelation is playing itself out, it becomes a bit arbitrary. You would think, if you were Martin Luther, that the Pope was this Antichrist beast figure. Or if you lived during World War II, you would think maybe Hitler is this beast figure, and so it becomes a bit arbitrary. And with the idealist view, it is true that there's a lot of symbolism, obviously, in the book of Revelation, but it seems like it's referring to real events. It's not just symbols that can be laid across any culture, but rather there are real things going on in the first century, especially with Christian persecution in Rome, that you have to deal with. So I think that the best view is what's called the eclectic view. It's the 5th view, and it basically says we have to approach Revelation in its correct genre, which is Jewish apocalyptic. It's going to use symbolic imagery, but it's symbolic for something that's real. It's going to talk about the past, but it's also going to talk about the future. It's a complex book, and we need to keep those things in mind when we interpret it. Sometimes I get asked, are we living in the end times? Which is an interesting question. We've been in the end times for 2,000 years. The end times is a theological category that the biblical authors use when people start getting up from the dead. So when Jesus is resurrected, we see the inbreaking of the end times. So yes, we're in the end times, but we've been in the end times for 2,000 years. Everybody throughout church history has always thought that Christ was coming back in their day. Luther thought that, Edwards thought that. In the 1940s, people thought that with Hitler. We are in the end times, but we've been in the end times for 2,000 years. And so we have to keep that in mind with that question.